Coming up in today's newscast, envoys from the United Nations, the Palestinians and Egypt chat Middle East peace in Cairo. Prime Minister Netanyahu makes a plea on behalf of the people of Iran, and competing in this year's Emmy Awards are not one, but two films made right here in the Holy Land by Israeli filmmakers. Right now, Palestinian, Egyptian, and international diplomats are all convening in Cairo to discuss measures to avoid an all-out war on the Israel-Gaza front. The weekly clashes have been boiling over for months now, with semi-regular rocket attacks threatening to plunge the region into conflict. But the United Nations Middle East envoy says that after meeting with Egyptian officials, he is confident that all sides can resolve the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and avert regional war. These words come on the heels of the UN envoys' meetings with both Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel as well as Palestinian Fatah reps in Cairo. And despite the back-and-forth dance of constant bloodshed that we've seen in the last few months, all sides have stressed their desires not to see this erupt into war. Egypt especially has been said to have played a crucial role in pressuring Hamas to calm its offensive maneuvers, including the rocket attacks as well as incendiary kites and balloons. But a dire situation in Gaza may be playing a role in the bloodshed as well. Following United States President Donald Trump's decision to cut the majority of its aid money to UNRWA, hundreds of jobs for aid workers have been eliminated in the Strip.
هناك تهديد واضح بأنه في حالة وقف المساعدات وعدم وصولها سيتم أو لن يتم فتح العام الدراسي، بالتالي 250,000 طالب فلسطيني سيكونوا في المجهول، سيكونوا في الشوارع، سيكونوا في التشرد.
Israel has accused this agency of filtering money to terror cells including Hamas. But the director of UNRWA's operations in Gaza, who is a veteran humanitarian worker having been placed all over the world, says otherwise.
We get money to serve the Palestine refugees. We do not get money to serve Hamas. So I have had absolutely no reports, no evidence that any of the resources we have get diverted to Hamas. We use them to run our services for 1.3 million refugees.
For now, it remains to be seen if Palestinian factions will be able to work towards solving the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, or whether this will all spiral out of control. Zionist Union Knesset member Eitan Broshi has now been suspended by his party leader Avi Gabay following yet another accusation of sexual misconduct. This less than 2 weeks after Broshi was forced to apologize to his colleague, MK Ayelet Nachmias Verbin, for inappropriately touching her buttocks at a recent party. Now, the new allegations reportedly took place 15 years ago when Broshi allegedly made advances on a coworker in an elevator. The woman, who spoke to Channel 10 on condition of anonymity, said she was blocked in the elevator of a hotel where she and Broshi attended a seminar. She claims Broshi pushed her, grabbed her, and touched her in her genitals, all while asking what her problem was. She reportedly pushed her way out and reported the incident to her then supervisor, who corroborated her story to Channel 10. Now, Broshi has since denied the allegations against him and is refusing Gabay's suggestion to resign, and he's even now threatening to sue Gabay over his suspension. Here now with more is Gil Ronen, a columnist and chairman of the Family Movement. Gil, thank you so much for coming in and being with us today. So, my first question, what's your reaction to this? Should Broshi resign?
Look, it's in the end, it's a he said, she said situation. We don't really know what happened. Now, we're all very aware of human rights and women's rights, and nobody wants to condone sexual offenders in any sort of way. But there has to be some sort of a balance between our intention of prosecuting the sexual offenders and their basic human rights and the presumption of innocence. And the way things work here in Israel with the women's groups is that basically he can deny all he wants. He can hang on to his seat. What they'll do is they'll put out a sort of like an APB to all women who have ever had any sort of negative contact with Broshi. And then these women will start coming forward with anonymous accusations. And that's the big problem. I don't think the U.S. Is quite at this level. It's
anonymous to us, but there have been some names. I mean, I spoke about a former supervisor and then the plaintiff herself who have made these accusations. Should the suspension at least stand until long enough for the investigation to continue?
Well, is there actually a police investigation? This is something that happened, if assuming that it's true, happened 15 years ago, and the statute of limitations is way past. So I don't think there will be a police investigation. What can happen is that they will announce some sort of police probe. But again, the basic feeling here is that men do not have the presumption of innocence standing by them here in this country. And once you have somebody, especially somebody who's like a high-profile person like Broshi, who has one accusation against him, they're going to start putting forward more and more accusations, and they're all probably going to be anonymous.
Well, so here's the thing, though, is that I know that at least here in this country, the vast majority, we're talking over two-thirds, well over two-thirds, nearly three-quarters, of the allegations of sexual misconduct, rape, etc., are all going nowhere because of lack of evidence. Not necessarily that it didn't happen, but because the evidence there is lacking in the investigation. Now, with that being said, the former allegations against Broshi come from, a former MK, a colleague of his who
well, he admitted that.
He not only admitted
apologized,
that, but it was, well,
and
but
she
it was,
accepted his apology.
Seen. But it was seen. It was personally viewed by Avi Gabay and several other Knesset members, and it was he only apologized after Avi Gabay told him to.
Right.
In fact, he ignored the MK who he had touched, until Avi Gabay intervened. So again, isn't there a sort of sense of like this boys' club where, if it wasn't seen, he would have gotten away with it because the lack of evidence is there?
Well, the thing is, that's true for any crime. And, women also commit crimes. But there's a complete double standard.
But I think that the statistics worldwide will show that men are disproportionately more likely to rape or perform some sort of sexual assault.
Maybe, but as far as violence is concerned, for instance, it's very balanced. And there's a lot of other types of crimes out there also. The feeling is that men do not get a fair shake here in the sense that once the women's groups hone in on them, the guy's finished. Everybody says, he's finished, it's over. And, I think if we had the same standard in the U.S., probably Donald Trump would never have been elected because they tried something like that when he was about to be elected. That if he does leave the Knesset, then there's another Knesset member, another politician who's going to fill his seat. And then there's always the question of, is this other guy somehow involved in telling other women to come forward and say that Broshi touched me, etc.? A lot of these accusations turn out in the end to be bogus, and we have to accept this. We can't just declare open season on men and say that once a woman made the accusation, it 100% has to be true. Well, and she never went to the police, by the way.
But I will say that, and unfortunately we have to cut this off, but I will say that allegations should be taken seriously regardless of the time, kind of distance between them and the statute of limitations. And when we're talking about sexual assault, there are many reasons that a sexual assault might not come to the fore right away. In this case, again, the allegations come from a former coworker. So I think there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that we don't know, granted.
Exactly. But
it should be investigated, and it shouldn't be kind of brushed off as, oh, it's old and who cares.
If it can be investigated, let it be investigated, definitely.
All right, now for more on this divisive topic, I'd like to turn to attorney and co-chair of Laila Tov, Karen Greenblatt. Karen, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks.
So I guess what are your initial responses to what we heard?
I'd rather not comment on all the conspiracies against women's groups, which are obviously not really based on reality. But I do think one thing that's important to emphasize is something you said. There are a lot of reasons why complaints of sexual assault or sexual harassment don't come to light for many, many years in some cases. One of the reasons is because we know what the public response is. We know how the public in Israel responds to victims of sexual assault, searching for reasons to call them liars, searching for ways to undermine their stories. And that's one of the reasons why a woman or a man would choose not to come out with their stories right when they happened, even though in this case we do know that the case was reported the next day or the same day to this woman's supervisor. So in this case, I mean, coming out and saying it's been 15 years, there's no legitimacy to the complaint is false. I think there's a lot of women who will come out with their stories once they hear the same person who harmed them also harmed another woman.
So that's a good point, which actually goes back to what Mr. Ronen said in terms of how, sometimes they'll kind of put an APB of some sorts to bring in other people and kind kind of try and find validity to previous sexual assault claims.
I don't think that happens. There's no APB. There's no like centralized
maybe
feminist
APB,
war room
word,
that
right.
looks for more stories. I think women who see their assaulter coming out with another assault against another woman will have an interest to come out with their own story to validate that
right.
woman's experience.
So now I know that I even just a moment ago said, you know, every sexual assault allegation should be taken seriously and investigated, but there is also something to be said about a statute of limitations. So what do you say to that, you know, 15-year gap?
What I say is that the criminal arena is only one way that us as a society have to examine whether a person should be in the public sphere or not. Broshi is an MK. He represents the public in our parliament. And I think there are other ways that we can examine whether it's valid that he's there in this position and receives his salary from the public when he represents somebody who thinks he's above the law in terms of how he relates to women. So the fact that there can be no criminal action taken on something that happened 15 years ago means nothing if as a society we decide that we are not condoning this type of culture, that we're trying to change the norms of how people are treated, of their dignity, of how they're treated at work, and in other spheres of their lives. So I think we really need to remember that determining what the truth is about something is not only something that the police or judges in a criminal courtroom can do. We can do that as a society as well.
Yes, and that kind of brings me to your organization, Laila Tov, and how, you know, how does this sort of thing affect the public sphere in the arena that you fight in?
So what Laila Tov does is work with bars and clubs in order to train the staff there to identify potential sexual harassment and assault within their bar or club and try to prevent that from happening or address any kind of complaint that comes up to them. What we also do is we have signs in all the places that join our voluntary code, and that they say to the clients, if you feel like somebody's bothering you, if you feel like somebody's hurting you, you can come to the staff and the staff is trained to deal with it. So what we think this does is it expresses a message that this space can be safe for you, and it can be a space that the staff has their eye open and will give backing to whoever says that they've been harmed, and will try to deal with it with the right tool set for that type of arena, which is obviously very different from a workplace and very different from other spheres where there need to be different tools for interventions.
Karen Greenblatt, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Today. Iran's economy has just sunk to a record new low as the local currency drops past 100,000 rials to the American dollar. This is likely in anticipation of the incoming United States sanctions set to hit the regime on August 7th, following President Trump's decision to withdraw the U.S. from the JCPOA nuclear deal. This economic turmoil is likely exactly what both Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu were hoping for, as a means to combat the regime's aspirations to attain nuclear weapons. The United States is also preparing to level financial consequences on nations that continue to do business with Iran after November. In line with this, Netanyahu has actually just published a message to the world in English regarding the mounting crisis. According to him, the chaos in Iran is unrelated to the United States pressure, but instead the Ayatollah's agenda of war and terror.
This is a tough story, but you need to hear it. Imagine a 15-year-old Iranian girl named Fatemeh. She's smart, and she dreams of starting her own business. Fatemeh wakes up for a run before school. She tries to fill up her water bottle, but this is the water that comes out. What are our leaders doing with all our money? Fatemeh asks in despair. She opens the Vataneh Imruz newspaper, and she finds out. Billions wasted moving Iran's army to Syria. Billions wasted trying to get nuclear weapons. Billions wasted on war in Yemen. Fatemeh may be an imaginary name, but her story is the real story of millions of Iranians.
Indeed, reports of intense protests in the streets of Tehran against the regime's agenda has begun to filter in. But economists say that the line between financial and political protests is often a blurry one, dating back to the 1979 revolution. In fact, in decades prior to 1979, Iran actually had quite friendly relations with Israel. Iran was actually the second Muslim-majority nation to recognize Israel's right to exist as well. Though many Iranian citizens remember and still grow those seeds of friendship, current leaders have reiterated a mission to decimate Israel from the face of the earth. The United States, however, has rejected accusations that a regime change is the real objective with these sanctions. Trump has learned the hard way that business with Iran is a two-way street. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/3 of the world's oil exports pass through. Following threats to block oil shipments, Trump backed off of previously fiery rhetoric, suddenly tweeting that now he was prepared to offer Iran a real deal. Others are unsure what moves Iran will make if forced into a corner. A lot is at stake in the coming weeks. Yesterday, a Palestinian teenager was released from prison after being convicted of harassing and slapping IDF soldiers near her home village in the occupied West Bank. Ahed Tamimi served an 8-month sentence following her plea of guilty for an incident that was infamously captured on tape. Whether Israel likes it or not, young Tamimi is now the de facto new face of the Palestinian resistance, and LTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with more.
Hi, thanks, Aaron. So Tamimi's only been out of prison for about 24 hours, but she's already become one of the most recognized faces in Palestinian society. And that's not really a surprise, of course, given how huge that media coverage was back when she was arrested. And that video footage that you're talking about kind of reignited that entire debate, both in Israeli society and then in the international community, about Israeli conduct overall in the occupied territories. So it's...
Right. So, okay, so then here's where things get gray for me, at least. You know, I've said this before, but Tamimi comes from a family that has consistently caused disruption and pledged resistance against practically everything to do with Israel. You know, the family has often been accused of manipulating the media for their own political agenda. They've openly supported the Sbarro pizzeria bombing from 2001, which was actually perpetrated by Ahed's own cousin, Alam Tamimi. And Ahed herself was even awarded for her courage against the occupation a few years ago by then Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan. You know, they practically invented the term Pollywood, or at least that's what many people thought when, you know, this latest video footage first went viral. They said it was Tamimi just trying to elicit a soldier into attacking her on camera as propaganda against Israel.
Yeah, that's valid criticism. I mean, that family is even proud of that criticism. But, you know, I would say that Tamimi, in her own words, both then and now, she would say that the only reason that she confronts soldiers at all is because they're there in the first place. You know, Tamimi's village is in a particularly complicated area of the West Bank, where IDF security measures, you know, guns, checkpoints, midnight security raids, etc., they're a daily part of regular life for Palestinians. And that's what here's what she said at a press conference after her release yesterday. Take a look.
أنا بقدرش أتوقع للمستقبل بالإضافة إنه بقدرش أتعمق بالحكي كتير لأنه علي وقف تنفيذ بس بحكي إنه أنا بقدرش أتوقع للمستقبل الاحتلال يعني يمكن بكرة فلسطين تكون متحررة فأنا بعرف شو راح يصير بالمستقبل بالنهاية ومش راح أقدر أقرر شو راح يصير بالمستقبل بتمنى إنه يعني يكون الاحتلال رايح عشان ما أقدرش أعمل يعني ما أفكرش حتى أعمل هيك شغلات.
So look, maybe IDF occupational precautions are necessary evils there. I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made there, for sure. That's a separate argument. But I think by now we are seeing the effects of those measures on regular Palestinians. I mean, if you were looking at guns in your face 24/7, that would have an impact on you. And Israel has only doubled down on that policy as time goes on. I mean, Tamimi has just served in prison for slapping soldiers for 8 months, and that's roughly the same amount of time that Elo Azaria served for manslaughter. Azaria is, of course, the former IDF soldier who was caught on camera delivering a fatal headshot to a neutralized, unarmed Palestinian terrorist in Hebron while he was lying on the ground. So that same system that repeatedly reduced Azaria's sentence and turned him into something of a national hero for many Israelis has also turned Tamimi into a national hero for many Palestinians. And that's why we see her now meeting with President Abbas, you know, visiting Arafat's grave. That's kind of how we always see this game play out, you know?
All right, well, in another related case yesterday, 2 Italian artists were apparently arrested for spray painting a graffiti mural of Tamimi's face on the separation barrier in the city of Bethlehem. These were 2 Italian nationals here on tourist visas, not connected to any NGOs or Palestinian groups that we're aware of.
Yes, so actually there is an update on that as well. So those artists have just been banned from Israel for 10 years because they were painting that mural. And I'm not sure if I've ever heard of an incident quite like that, where a work of graffiti can ban you from a country, not in a Western country anyway. I mean, the mural didn't have any rallies for violence, didn't have any words at all, in fact. It was literally just a picture of her face. I mean, Israel obviously considers this painting to be something of a very serious security threat. But again, by doing this, the state may just be playing into Tamimi's power, into her own legacy, let's say, as this symbol of authority and resistance. So whether you disagree or agree with either her or Israel's agendas, their politics, their practices, that's something else entirely I'm not backing anyone here, but from the outside, I'm just looking at more or less how this cycle seems to work again and again and kind of, go back and forth.
All right, well, Tamimi is out and about again, so I guess we'll see firsthand very soon how this all plays out. Thanks for your report, Brett.
Of course.
2 Israeli films have just been nominated for this year's Emmy Awards and have already been shortlisted for this year's prestigious Film and Television Prize. Thankfully, ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has all the details. Emmanuel.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, the 2 films that have been nominated for an Emmy are the films Forever Pure and Princess Shah. Now, I'll give you a quick rundown on each film so you guys get a little bit more details. The film Forever Pure is a documentary based around Beital, Jerusalem's football club, and more directly focuses on its fans' racist outrage in 2012 when the club signed 2 Muslim players. Now, this film was nominated under the News and Documentary Emmy Awards.
All right. Now, before we get into the second movie's rundown for Forever Pure, I actually understand that it's won some awards in the past, if I'm correct, right?
Right, that's correct, Aaron. The film made by Maya Zinstein won 3 awards at the Jerusalem Film Festival in 2016 and was later also screened at many international film festivals and also was reportedly purchased by Netflix just last year.
Wow. I knew it did well at the Jerusalem Film Fest, but I did not know how well.
Yes.
And then to get this kind of recognition, not just from Netflix, but from the Emmys,
exactly.
It's a huge deal. I can't wait to actually see this film for myself. I'm a huge Netflix fan.
I know.
So tell me more about the second film being nominated this year.
All right, so Princess Shah is the second film. It's made by Dohar and has been shortlisted on the POV, or point of view category, which is dedicated to films which focus on arts and culture. So the film tells the story of New Orleans singer Princess Shah, who is accidentally discovered by Israeli musician Kutiman. And this film has already reported that Netflix also purchased this one.
All right, so both of these films purchased by Netflix, they both sound like must-sees for sure.
100%.
When exactly are the Emmys themselves?
So the awards evening is set to take place on October 1st of this year. So, we have a bunch more time until we actually find out that the Israeli films won. I'm a little bit optimistic, but I think we got this. These 2 films are going to be amazing.
All right, well, I guess we'll find out in October.
Yes.
Thanks for the update, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
Now, to the average tourist, the Israeli city of Lod is mostly known as that little city next to the airport. Well, pretty soon, I have a feeling that you're going to be putting Lod near the top of your travel list. A second Roman-era mosaic has just been discovered at the construction site where, coincidentally, an incredible mosaic center is also being built as we speak. Take a look. This impressive find features stunning craft, design, and creativity that dates back some 1,700 years. Like others before it, this mosaic is adorned with animals, both real and imaginary, as well as intricate interlaced designs and colors. As you can see, it was found in considerably great condition, and archaeologists believe that this dig site was once home to a luxurious Roman villa reserved for the society's most elite citizens. But right now, teams are working to turn it into a new kind of luxury, the Shelby White and Leon Levy Lod Mosaic Center, a museum that invites visitors hundreds of years into the past with stunning works of ancient Roman art. This mosaic will obviously be the new centerpiece to the museum once it's completed, and we're still about 2 years away from that happening. But in the meantime, all that digging is clearly paying off, and who knows what archaeologists will find in the years to come. The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Here in Israel, we often find some sort of amazing archaeological find, and before it shows to the public, it's got to be preserved. So today's word is lishmor, meaning to preserve or to keep. A shomer keeps watch over a community, while a fruit shomer or keeps for just a few days. But when anachnu shomrim, or we preserve, an ancient artwork like the mosaic unearthed in Lod, it'll hopefully stay around for long after we're gone. Just be sure to shomer, or keep your wits about you when you come to see the new mosaic. It's gorgeous and totally worth it to preserve or lishmor. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy but warm as the summer heat wave continues. The low tonight will be around 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect sunny skies and no change in temperatures. The high should be 88 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.67 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.